Hello and welcome back to the sideboard here at Star City Games, Edison, New Jersey, otherwise known as the Snowpen Series. I am here with Pro Tour legend, champion, well-known Magic player, Osyp Lebedowicz, and you have Esper Control.
Yes.
But it's a little bit of a different take on Esper Control, not just because of the new cards that are involved, but it's sort of a little bit of a shift in the way Esper Control is trying to win the game, as far as I can tell. So tell me a little bit about your thought process in building Esper.
Well, I kind of wanted to try playing Control in this format just because I haven't really gotten to play Control in a while. Usually I'd play some sort of aggro Control deck like Blue, White, Red or Naya. I wanted to just try going back to Control. So I liked some of the new cards that Esper got, especially Water Grave. That's probably the biggest one. But
right.
There were a lot of cards that were just added to the deck that kind of made it seem like it'd be pretty good for this format. And I kind of took some of the builds that I've seen in the past, like by Shaheen Sarini, and I sort of streamlined it a little more because there were a lot of cards that I just didn't think were very good in the deck. They didn't really make sense anymore, especially in this type of format.
Sure.
So I got rid of all the Lingering Souls and like in my opinion, the best Planeswalkers in this type of deck, what you want to do in this environment is just Tameo and Sorin. So just play two of each. I don't want to.
So yeah, you have Tameo and Sorin in Esper Control, which used to be the norm, and then they fell out of favor when people were trying to go like big Control, only winning with Drown Yards, no other win conditions, and they sort of fell out of favor. But now you're bringing them back.
The thing is that like in mid-range, you really need a card like Sorin or Tameo to deal with Thragtusk, you know? And Tameo's the best card that you can have against Thragtusk, and following it up with cards like Supreme Verdict is just awesome.
Right.
But part of the reason why I really like playing the Planeswalkers again is because of Blind Obedience, because before you would kind of tap out for a Planeswalker, and then they would have one of their haste creatures, like a Hell Rider or a Thundermail Hellkite, or a Falcor after Aristocrat, and you would just lose your Planeswalker.
Right.
Whereas the Obedience kind of saves that.
It seems like, and you're playing the full 4 Blind Obedience. It certainly seems like this format is full of Ash Zealots and Lightning Maulers and Thundermail Hellkites and Hell Riders.
I just don't get why people only play like 2 or 3. It's like, you need that card to beat the red deck.
Right. It turns the creatures into good creatures, but average creatures.
But average, like if you can shut off their haste, you are very far ahead of them. And then it makes your Supreme Verdict so much better. It makes your Planeswalkers better. And like you actually gain a fair amount of life with the Extort between Think Twice and Azorius Charms and Ultimate Prices and Devour Flesh. You actually gain a fair amount of life during the course of a match.
Yeah.
So it's like people try to hedge. They try to play like 2 or 3 because they say they don't want to give up too much against like other Control decks or other Naya decks, but the fact is that the other, like in other Control matchups, the cards that only really matter are Nefalia's Drown Yard and like Permission.
Sure.
Having 4 slots devoted to Blind Beats is not going to be the difference between winning or losing.
Right.
And against mid-range decks, it's not great, but it's still, again, the cards that matter are Sphinx of Revelation and Planeswalkers and Supreme Verdict. So it's, you know, you could maybe take 2 and maybe replace it with the Lingering Souls, but it doesn't really do that much for you.
And this also gains you life in several situations, whereas Lingering Souls only chump blocks, if that, assuming they don't have Thundermail Hellkite. Yeah. So yeah, this definitely does a whole lot for this deck. Yeah. One of the more interesting cards for me in your deck is Psychic Strike. It's obviously better than Cancel in this deck, or anything, or any of the other 3-mana counterspells, because it only costs 1 blue mana.
Yeah.
And you're a mostly white-based deck. And so you have certain games where you have a Plains or a Nephalia Drown Yard as one of your first 3 lands. Yeah. And so you definitely want to be able to counter their spells. Yeah,
the fact that it's not a double blue definitely helps out a lot. But honestly, the fact that it mills comes in handy a lot with Azorius Charm, like later in the game, because generally they're always going to attack first and then cast their spells. So you can charm them, they cast a spell, and then you kind of mill them. So it sort of serves the role that Thought Scour did with pseudo removal with Azorius Charm, and it's been very good for me.
Devour Flesh, as we've been seeing, is a 2 or 3 of in a lot of different decks. Tell me a little bit about having another Diabolic Edict back in the format.
I mean, again, it's a 2-mana removal spell, which if you're on the play and against a red deck, it's a way to kill a Cackler, which Ultimate Price can't. It deals with Geist Saint Trap. It's not my favorite removal spell in the deck, but it deals with the cards that are annoying, like Geist Saint Trap, and it does randomly help you against aggressive decks because sometimes you can wrath them, and then their follow-up is just a card like Boris Reckoner. Ultimate Price doesn't deal with it. Now you can Devour Flesh it and still have mana up to Psychic Spiral, strike something, or cast a thing twice, or do anything else.
Sure. Moving over to your sideboard, we've got a couple big heavy hitters in the sideboard: Drogskull Reaver and Obsidat Ghost Council. Obsidat was in a main deck of one of the top 8 lists last week. It's in your sideboard here. Serves a somewhat different role. Tell me about what those 2 cards are for.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not in love with either one, but I felt like you needed some sort of additional fatty threat after board where maybe your planeswalkers won't be that impressive in certain matchups. So I felt I didn't want to go all in on one because I think that the Council is much better against Jund decks, whereas the Drogskull Reaver is much better against Naya. So I felt just going for a split. Either one has been fantastic for me, depending on the matchup. But I don't know if I'd up the numbers or anything or start playing the main deck.
Now you also have a Psychic Spiral, which is a card that I'd seen in a couple of lists, but people were sort of sticking with Jace Memory Adept because that's what they were used to. But you have the one Psychic Spiral, and that's because you have Snapcaster Mages that you can flash back against the other Memory Adept decks?
Yeah, the thing about Psychic Spiral is that you kind of need to play it in your sideboard, at least to keep them honest, because if they know you have Psychic Spiral, they might not tap out for Sphinx's Revelation later in the game. They might not activate both their Drown Yards. It makes the mirror matches very difficult to navigate because there's this threat of, okay, if he has a Snapcaster Mage, I might just lose.
Yeah.
So it sort of keeps them honest. I did play in the mirror once, and it did win me the game. So I think, and plus you only need to play one. You don't need to really overload. So I think it's a solid card. I don't like it as much as Jace, just because Jace is a planeswalker. You have to cast it in your main phase, and there's a lot of ways that you can kind of get around it.
Right. Going forward, you're X1 right now.
Yeah.
You're happy with your tournament so far, as well as you can be when you're X1.
Yeah.
Is there anything so far that you've seen that you would change to the deck?
I don't think I changed that much. I think you're pretty good. You have pretty good matchups against the majority of the field. My one loss was to Dark Naya, which I didn't expect people to play anymore. But that can be a difficult matchup because they have Slaughter Games and Rakdos Return after board. And they also, if you're dealing with a lot of planeswalkers like Big Garrick, it's kind of tough for you to deal with sometimes. So Dark Naya is a tough matchup. But beyond that, I mean, most of the field is kind of what I expected, and this deck I think is pretty well suited, so I don't think I changed anything right now.
Excellent. Well, Osyp, thank you so much for sitting down with us and talking about Esper Control. It was great.